So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We take a couple of minutes just to let people connect, and then we will start. Really, just 1 more minute. And
Hi, Alessandra. Just to check if you can you speak, please, just to check your.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
okay, perfect. Now we also have settled a bit the technical side. I will really just take 1 minute to welcome again everybody, also those who connected just now. This is the first webinar of our series. And when I say we, I'm speaking as a co-coordinator of the Food Thematic Partnership within the major framework of the Urban Agenda for Europe. I'm Elisa Porreca. I work as an officer in the Food Policy Department of the city of Milan. And I will, after really this very small welcome, I would like to leave the floor to the content of this first webinar that we are hosting today. So I would leave the floor either to Raffaella very briefly, and then possibly to Alessandra Manganelli from ISOP to introduce our speakers for today. Thank you so much.
Yes, Elisa, thanks. I'm the Food Partnership Officer. Just some explanation about this webinar. We will have two interesting case studies today, and you can write your question in the chat, and after this presentation, we will have the possibility to, of course, ask to the speaker and go more in detail into these topics. So please feel free to share your question in the chat and after in the Q&A session. And yes, I will give the floor to Alessandra in order to present the speakers.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure to briefly introduce Amanda Edmonds and Cecilia Delgado, who are both part of the ESOP Sustainable Food Planning Steering Group. So Amanda combines a profile of consultant with the one of researcher on sustainable food systems. She carries out consultancy work on food system policy evaluation and strategy at the local and national scales, being also a founder of a non-profit food organization. She's currently pursuing a PhD in spatial planning at Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and she has been working and living in Europe and US, so she will share with us this food system expertise across the Atlantic. So we welcome Amanda, and Cecilia is a researcher fellow at the Interdisciplinary Center of Social Sciences of the New University of Lisbon in Portugal, and also president of the non-profit Portuguese National Association Nurturing Sustainable Cities. This is the translation from the Portuguese. Her research areas are urban and peri-urban agriculture, urban food systems, urban climate policies, and urban planning. And Cecilia will introduce herself, the special guest, Joana Oliveira, who also will present today. So we leave the floor to Amanda first for her presentation. Thank you.
Alessandro, just the last thing, I would kindly to inform you the webinar is recorded, and we will use the registration for dissemination purposes, so we'll probably publish the registration on the Urban Agenda website. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'll take from here. Let me share my screen one moment and get started. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, thanks for having me. As Alessandra mentioned, I'm actually here based now back in Ypsilanti, Michigan, where it's snowing for the first time in the season, but I've just moved back from 5 years in London. And during my 5 years in Europe, I had the chance, as someone who's been working in sustainable food systems for a few decades now, to really look at the framing and the approaches and the structures used in Europe. And I found a lot of inspiration from seeing how things are done differently. And so thought that for this, that hopefully you can find some tidbits to hear about how we've done things in Michigan and a bit more in the US as you're thinking about the approaches for the incredible work that's happening there. So Alexandra already gave me a little bit of an intro, but I spent most of my career running a nonprofit on the ground doing food systems work in a community and food access work, but I also was the mayor of that city, of my city for 4 years, so I have experience as a policymaker and that side of the policy table. And as she mentioned, I'm now doing consultancy and doing a very slow mid-career doctorate in spatial planning, looking at municipal policy and planning around farmers markets. So a little bit about me, but more broadly, the first 10, 15 years of my career, I was really transforming my values into tangible physical change, helping people build gardens. We built an urban farm, we built farmers markets, we built a kitchen incubator. So really seeing and feeling that change and having that experience of what change making looks like on the ground. And then that moved me into really my shift into thinking about how do I translate that, the opportunities, the barriers into the policy and systems change. That picture in the middle is the former governor of Michigan signing a bill I advocated for into law. And so that's the work that I do now, is taking the on the ground experience and bringing it in the bigger picture of moving the needle. So the context of what I'll talk about, here's Michigan for you, surrounded by the largest volume of fresh water in the world, the Great Lakes. We have two parts, Upper and Lower Peninsula. And then in this more colorful slide, you can see where City of Ypsilanti is related to the City of Detroit just down the road. I'll talk about Kalamazoo over there, and just for your geographic reference, there's Chicago and the state of Illinois just not so far away. And a little bit more to put that in comparison, because maps can be hard to compare, but this is a scale map of United Kingdom overlaid with Michigan. We're actually very similar in landmass, but as you see, very different in population and thus very different in density. Most of the US is far, far, far less dense than Europe. And so some agricultural and food system context are a really diverse agricultural state, second only to California, who has a whole different climate than ours. And we grow 300 different commercial products, meaning we grow actually a lot of different things that people eat. That's very unlike other agricultural states in the US, where they grow corn and soybeans, things that are made into fuel and animal feeds largely. So we're in a really rich place in that way. And while people think of Michigan as a manufacturing state, which is the #1 industry because of the basis of the auto industry in Detroit, agriculture actually employs about a fifth of the workforce of the state. So our approach over the last 15, 20 years, for those of us doing food systems work, and I'm going to touch on these characteristics throughout the examples I'm going to very quickly share, is that we really take a systems approach. And so here's a food web, ecosystem sort of diagram, but just to show you that you pull on one of those and everything else is affected. So our food systems work in Michigan is always thinking about the system, always thinking about how one piece affects the other, where the gaps, where the needs are, and where there's that win-win and that overlap. We do our work really through networks, long-term networks, not just from one project or one funding, but staying together across the state and our work in our local communities, and have a really big tent approach that anyone who wants to come is welcome. We're rooted in equity, really at the forefront of all of our work. We're always working how to measure our collective impact, how we look at what all the little pieces of things we're doing adds up to moving the needle, and we're always working, not always successfully, but always moving towards broader policy change. So some of those examples of how we do that work. In Michigan, we love having a food charter. This is our roadmap, our framework. Food charter in other places, right, called a food plan or food strategy, but for the work across the state. We were one of the first in the country to publish a 10-year food charter, 10-year roadmap in 2010, and now in 2022 we launched our second-year roadmap. Really focused on equity, health, sustainability, and thriving economies, and again, all of the overlaps there. And across the country, to give you some broader context, food plans and strategies have gotten more and more traction, and particularly in the last 10 years. California, Configure, did the first one, but Michigan came in 2010 along with North Carolina, and so we were one of the earlier ones in the country that are looking at either the state level or in the Northeast multi-state level, because they're pretty small places. And if you see, this is the current scene. About half of the states in the United States have a state or, again, broader multi-state food plan, strategy, charter, or have one under development. So that's some context for you. Our charter, and again, I'm giving you very, very high level on things, and we could dive in the Q&A and/or in follow-ups. I can send you lots of links into details of these. But these are the areas that our current charter is framed under. We are really focused on local, getting as many folks in Michigan to be eating as much of the food grown in Michigan. Even though it is also an export agricultural economy, the local and regional is very much where our rooting is. You know, in Europe, more commonly called short supply chains, but that's really at our core. But what does that also mean for our farms and our farms being able to thrive and people getting starting other food businesses? And then how do we think about our farm workers? And how do we think about other employment pieces of who our next generation of food system leaders are? The nutrition, health, food access piece is really, really core. I'd say in the US far more than I've seen in European food system work, and has been, I'd say, a main driver of a lot of the food system work in the US, including in Michigan in the last 10 to 15 years. And we see all these different pieces, too, of the food system work, not just as, oh, we look at a diagram of food system and we've got production and consumption and transportation and all distribution, all the pieces in between, but that the important thing is that these things overlap and these things affect each other. And so one of our reasons for working in a very systems approach is that working on one, and you have to work on the other to get to the outcomes that you want. So it is all not just about the system, but about the overlap and we think about win-wins within the system. We're not going to go through the words on this slide, but this is an example in the charter of that area of nutrition, health, and food, and how it breaks down into a vision statement, where we're trying to get to, and into very specific sort of enumerated items of what we're trying to do. That then translates into policy work, into strategies, into other sort of things. We use the charter both as a kind of key roadmap and identifying document for the work that's happening across the state. We find a lot of common ground. We use it as a way to find identified shared actions we can do together to move policy and to think again about that shared measurement. And one of the ways I keep saying networks, this works on the ground, is that we have kind of a network of networks. And many of them have been operating for many, many, many years. They are big tent again, in that anyone can show up, and we invite more and more people to them to help us organize this work. So these are facilitated by our backbone organization of food system work in the state, which is the Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems. But this is where people come together to learn what's happening, to get ideas, to figure out challenges, to figure out shared opportunities for working at bigger, on bigger, say there's a state or national policy issue that people are facing. And people come to these tables across sectors, across areas, and it's been really, it's pretty unique. We talk to people around the country, and just the degree to which there is this collaborative nature, which isn't always perfect, is pretty incredible. One of those kind of networks is a network of food policy councils. We don't currently have a state food policy council. We used to have a governmental run one under a previous governor, but we no longer do. But what we do have are local food policy councils. It's something that's risen in popularity also in Michigan, but we have a network of them all coming together. So we have a shared learning environment for these now 27 councils that cover different regions as well as tribal communities across the state of Michigan. They cover a good chunk of the population of the state. Some of them are housed in local government, local or regional government. Some of them are housed in another broader nonprofit, and some of them are their own nonprofit organization themselves. And then they choose themselves what they want to work on and how they want to organize and what they want to be. This is from a 2019 pre-COVID look at what people were working on across food policy councils. Again, a lot around food access, but still you see topics that across food systems. But the point is that we then come together as with representatives from each food policy council and have the shared learning environment, have formal peer mentoring programs, and that again is indicative of kind of how we do work in Michigan. So I'm going to give you a really quick example of one of those food policy successes. First, I'm going to tell you how it works, and I'll tell you what the policy was. So based on early work with the Farm to School Network that was pre-2010, the initial Good Food Charter 2010 had a priority of this idea that became 10 cents a meal. We'll get to it in a second. It was taken then up by a nonprofit who said, hey, we'll try this. And they got some grant and other funding, tried it in their local community. It went well, got to move into being funded by state government as a pilot project, expanded to be a pilot project in other places because other legislators said, hey, I want that in my community. Fast forward to now, and this year we're at funding of $9.3 million from the state government. So that's a significant policy change, policy win that happened because we were already connected across the state to take this pilot project someone did that came out of the charter and turn it in to a whole thing and do the advocacy for it to become a part of the state's budget. Now, the goals of 10 cents a meal is about increasing health of our kids in schools and helping our farms thrive. Now, lots of words. You can look at this later if you get the slides. Basically, school districts have an allocation of how much they can spend in a given meal, and they are constrained by that. And this adds an extra 10 cents, which is actually quite significant. And that 10 cents can only be spent on Michigan-grown fruits and vegetables and dried beans, which are a lot of our grown in Michigan, which is a huge economic impact if we now look at $9.3 million in state funding to farmers across the state who are now able to sell to much larger institutions. And the impact on school meals and fresh food and consumption, et cetera, is also quite significant. So that we feel like is a real success story of charter organizing and people organizing around the state. But we get into one of those things. So think back at that food web diagram and the missing links. Well, one challenge when a farmer, a school's ready, has the money, farmers got the corn they want, but the school really needs frozen corn kernels because that's what they can do and prepare easily enough. Well, how do we get in the middle? And that's where something like a food hub can come in. Now, we're fortunate that Kalamazoo Valley Community College has a food hub that they operate. I think it's the only one I've seen in the country that's operated out of a community college. It's a business that they run as part of their educational institution, as part of their culinary program that is helping connect those farms and those consumers, particularly through institutions like hospitals, schools, etc. What's a food hub? Really, it's a way to get local and regional food to local folks and to local folks, and it can do aggregation, it can do processing, it does distribution, and you've seen one food hub and you've seen one food hub because they have lots and lots of different models. At Valley Hub, this one we have here, local farms, local producers come in, some light processing happens, and the food goes out to schools, to food banks, to hospitals, to restaurants, etc. And Valley Hub provides technical assistance to everyone about how to work with one another. It's aligned and embedded in their culinary programs. They also employ adults with disabilities. And this year, they've had external funding from grants and from the college. But this year, they are now reaching the point of about $2 million in annual sales, which will be enough to be self-sustaining and not need self-sustaining business within the college and not need further subsidies. Here's some of the outcomes of what they do. They distribute fresh food, but also they're extending the season and allowing Michigan-grown produce to be in schools and other institutions all year round. So finally, I got just a minute or so left. And finally, let's talk farmers markets. This is the area where I work most closely right now. And have a lot of passion. In the US, farmers markets are a key of our local and regional food system work and have had huge growth. This graph only goes to 2014, but since about 2005, there's really exponential growth in the US and farmers markets. We're right now between 8,000 and 9,000 total in the US. They are by far the dominant form of market. So in Europe, where in some places the sort of traditional town center market or the public market is a lot more common and farmers markets in some ways are fringe, farmers markets are the main kind of market that exists in most of the US. Historically, around the world, all markets were operated by municipalities from way back in the day. Now, actually, nonprofits play a big role in the United States in farmers markets. In the state, we have, again, think about networks, groups, coalitions. We have a really strong farmers market association. At the national, and about a dozen states in the U.S. have sort of similar. And at the national level, there's a farmers market coalition that plays that role in a bigger way. And now there's an emerging world farmers market coalition that's based out of Italy. I'm a consultant for those first two. I work very closely with them. And one of those things about shared measurement and collective impact. So you got a little market in your community, and we actually can know a lot about how all those little markets sort of add up. I helped the MIFMA develop and conduct a statewide census of farmers markets. So we know quite a lot about the farmers market sector. Again, this is what collective impact and shared measurement is about. We know and can say that 100% of the 83 counties in the state send vendors to a market. There are almost 5,000 vendor stalls open each week, 100,000 visitors on a given market day in the state. And we know that markets are really mission driven. And again, a little different from the framing I often see around markets in Europe is increasing healthy food access is kind of prime importance, but also around local farmers. So I think there's some opportunity. I've got just like a handful of slides left around thinking about more of those types of things in Europe. Apologies. What food assistance really looks like, and this kind of healthy food opportunity, sorry, my slide disappeared for me, is that there's many opportunities for low-income consumers to have sort of what coupons, in the form we often use in the US, wooden tokens, where they can shop at the farmers market without needing cash on their own. And this is a huge benefit to the farmers and other vendors, small businesses at these markets, and it's a huge benefit in terms of healthy food access. And at my own former farmers market, 73% of our customers had said the farmers market increased household access to fresh and healthy food. And that's a big deal because 43% of the customers in our market made income of under $25,000 a year in their household, and that is below the poverty line in our region, state, and country. So our market was really meeting that need, and we can go more into what that looks like. My own research to close out, I'm not really going to get into it, is actually looking at the municipal roles in markets, because I think markets are very much undervalued, and while they're seen as this nucleus of our local and regional food systems across the United States, they are not studied, paid attention to, etc., funded in the ways they need, unlike, for instance, urban agriculture, which gets a lot of play. And I come from that world, so I'm really evaluate, but I am trying to sort of fill that niche of really documenting and understanding the role of markets and policy and planning. So I have been doing studies that are actually searching municipal laws and code and zoning and land use and seeing where markets are or not covered. I find largely that they're absent, which is problematic in multiple ways, including that technically in the US, the way land use law works, that means that they are illegal uses of land, which is not a problem when they're popular, but is a problem when they're not popular, which actually, where there's a competing land use. They're seen as a temporary activity, which does give them a great amount of flexibility, but also when we are running many social programs on top of them around healthy food access and farmers are depending on them, when they're easy to move, shut, etc., that makes it problematic for this sort of core community institution. So my research gets into all of this. I'm not going to go into it. I'm going to end here, actually, because my time is up. Sorry, I'm running over a minute or two. And say thanks and hope that in discussion we can get into more of the things that you're interested in. I'm happy to share links to all of them, but that this gives you a few tidbits to think about in contrast to how some things are done in Europe. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I don't know if there are we can take just a few questions now and then the other in the final part of the webinar. So I don't know if there is. If there is no question, yes, there is one question now, and then we can, okay, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Amanda, for the presentation. It was very insightful. I work for the city of Brussels, and we are facing major issues with public procurement rules. We try to use our common kitchens. They are like preparing more than 5 million meals a year, so it's quite massive, and we would like to use this lever to make a benefit for our local producers, but we cannot, because we have to respect European laws of free market, and it's perfectly normal. But we would like to have some legal framework which is more in favor of this kind of, let's say, local producing. Help ahead, because they are quite struggling at the moment. And I would like to know how is it in the US? Do you have some similar rules? Do you have a legal framework that is also a struggle to deal with when it comes to helping local producers?
Yeah, and maybe 15 years ago now, when some of the first work on this was happening in the state of Michigan, there were similar things around competition laws and some things that are similar. And actually, the person at the Department of Education who wrote the specs of what things they were trying to procure for state meals overall for schools, she couldn't say she wanted, she couldn't give a location preference, which is what she wanted to do, say it's from Michigan, but she knew that the folks in Michigan were growing this specific kind of apple. And so she said, okay, these are the kind of apples that we want. And she knew that Washington State, which is where the other apples in the country come from, don't grow that kind of apples. And through that, she changed the entire state of Michigan procurement from Washington apples to Michigan apples. So I thought that was a really creative way, in the early days of figuring out how to write those sort of specifications and bids and things like that worked within the rules. I couldn't speak to the EU law on it, but that creativity had a giant kind of impact, and I think really moved the needle and got people really energized about what else we could do and how. I don't know if it's as, this legislation, the way it came in for 10 cents a meal, is that additional money is dedicated only for local product. And so that is written in that additional, pocket, but that's not touching the rest of the pocket that's coming in. The rest of the allocation federally and state for those dollars, but the additional gives that boost, and it then also helps to make those farmers who are now scaling up to sell to these bigger institutions that much more ready and competitive, probably in the bigger bidding systems that only the big farmers or farmers from far away were able to sort of get into. So I think it's a really entry point into that becoming more the norm.
Is there time? Few minutes left?
Yes, please, Alessandra, go with another question. And then
yes. Thank you a lot, Amanda. I was curious about something. Maybe you can give a short reply, although the question may be not that short. But this from what you presented in Michigan, it seems that there is a good balance between a sort of decentralization. So a lot of local initiatives like food policy councils are 27 popping up from your presentation, and then other local initiatives, but at the same time a good way of keeping all these things together, having also a system approach from the state level. What do you think is the key, if this interpretation is correct, are some of the key ingredients of this sort of local and higher level coordination between this initiative?
The key is that we have the Center for Regional Food System playing this role as this backbone organization. I mean, they are not running any of these entities, but they have, in the last 10 years in particular, they have said our role is to convene people. So, they also do a lot of evaluation and they do research, et cetera. But I think their role convening has made people want to be at the table because people find value in it. And so doing all the network of networks, I think, has made all the difference in the world. Because before that, I was doing this sort of work, but and you sort of hear of someone down the road, or maybe you meet someone at a conference, et cetera. But now there's a place that when you're doing this work and you want to learn who else is doing it or how to do it well, or what resources are coming down the pipe, having that as an institution. I mean, so we're not most of those networks are not coalitions. They're not as a group trying to make a change. They're just a place for people to come together, kind of at their core. And they've led to other groups and things and changes, etc. And continuing to invite people to the table. I mean, our current charter has quite a bit around climate, and we are really lacking the people in that space at the table. Like they're not there yet, and so we have to really in the next couple of years make a big effort to get those sort of people in the mix. So I think being conscious of always who's, and that's part of our equity focus, is being conscious of who's there and who's not there, and making conscious effort to bring other people in. So I would say those are two. That's two as a quick answer that have made all the difference. And we've got a couple entities in the state who show up sort of, but are different and are very clearly kind of, they're organizations that both have a lot of money. And they do come to the table, and that's fine, but they also have they don't play as collaboratively with others. So it doesn't mean that everything's roses here. But the fact that they always come to the table now is actually really helpful, because they didn't always, because they thought, well, we're doing our own thing, we have plenty of money, etc.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And there is just one request in the chat. If you could give a suggestion on how municipalities in the European context could support the public markets.
I mean, I could give you a dissertation on that. Let me think about that, and I'll put my email and stuff in the chat as well, and think about what kind of short answer I can give, because I really write whole papers on that topic. So I won't go into that now. How about I'll respond a little in the chat, if that's okay?
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay. So I would I will give the floor to Joana Oliveira for the next presentation, and then we have the Q&A session in the final part of the webinar.
So Joana, you present yourself?
Yeah, maybe if you can introduce Cecilia. I'm sorry I didn't introduce Joana Oliveira because I...
So thank you for the invitation to being here, and thank you, Joana, for accepting to be the speaker on this meeting. Joana Oliveira is the country director of the PROVEG Portugal non-for-profit organization, and she has been collaborating somehow with us, Feeding Sustainable Cities non-for-profit organization, on the webinars and awareness capacitation that we are giving. So the floor is yours, Joana. Joana is going to present us or to introduce us to an incredible project that her organization is doing. Joana, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you for this invitation, and thank you, everyone. So everyone is hearing me correctly, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So here I am to speak a little bit about changing food procurement with local, fully plant-based options. I'll talk a little bit about our program and what we are doing within this theme. So as Cecilia said, I'm the country director of PROVEG Portugal. PROVEG Portugal is a non-profit organization that aims to support the promotion of plant-based diet, always relating it to a healthy and ecological and compassionate, responsible lifestyle. So we were the former Portuguese Vegetarian Association, and we just joined the PROVEG International to be a little bit more stronger in what we are doing. So to give you a little bit of the Portuguese context, so we have a high ecological footprint. So, and I'm going to focus, this is our core actually, I'm going to focus a little bit on food consumption. And so more than 30% of the ecological footprint in Portugal is due to food consumption. So, and if we look at closer, more than half of this ecological footprint is due to meat and fish consumption. And it's important to say that Portugal has the highest fish consumption level in Europe. So this is important to be aware. And when we're talking about the ecological footprint, and not only about the carbon footprint, as you know, fish consumption is really a problem. So also to give you a little bit of context regarding law, it's important for you to understand this before I start explaining our Portugal case. So we have a unique law that was implemented in 2017, and this law established that it's mandatory for public canteens to offer at least one fully plant-based meal option. So this is unique in the world. So it's something that actually this law was implemented thanks to a petition that was led by us back in the days. So where does this law apply? So this law applies in public schools and universities, prisons, elderly home, hospitals and health centers, other social services. So basically all public canteens, almost practically all public canteens must comply with this law. Also, to give you a little bit of more context, we have this tool, it calls ECHO 360, that tries to help public entities to buy sustainable goods. So it's not mandatory, it's not very disseminated, but yes, we have this kind of strategy that tries to give some guidance for schools and other entities to buy goods that are environmental friendly. So it does state, for instance, that public entities should avoid buying goods from intensive farming, for instance. But again, it's very vague and it's not mandatory. And I can tell you that most of the councils in Europe, not in Europe, no, in Portugal, in Portugal, do not know about this. So yeah, this could be good if it was well disseminated. So what we think that could be a good strategy to improve the public procurement, and in specific public food procurement in terms of environment. We think that plant-based meal could be, as a default option, could be a solution. I'm not talking about putting plant-based meal as a default option every day. I'm talking about like weekly, like bi-weekly, because we believe this is something. We have a environmental problem regarding food consumption, but it's also important to respect the graduality. I don't know if it's what you say in English, but how the process can go. So even one single meal, like plant-based meal versus animal-based meal, when you're talking about only one meal, it's a huge difference. So here I have an example of a vegan lasagna versus a beef lasagna. And you can clearly see, and I'm only speaking about carbon footprint, like the carbon emissions. You can see that it's almost 6 times lower when we're talking about plant-based meals. So if we see the global data, replacing a non-vegetarian menu item, only one item, with a vegetarian option, we can be reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by about 30%. So this is very important when you're talking about public procurement, and when you're talking about public food procurement. And it's important to understand that plant-based meals make a huge difference. So what we decided to do based on all this data, we created a program called Sustainable Meals Program. And this program works with public institutions mainly, and it wants to increase and improve. It's very important to have tasty plant-based options in canteens and making them the default meal weekly, bi-weekly, or even monthly. And we're working mainly with schools, and now we introducing this program in universities and hospitals, which is great. So this is the team, and we actually have a team that is only dedicated to this, basically doing everything in the organization. So I'm very proud of this amazing team. And what the Sustainable Meals Program includes. So we do plant-based cooking training for canteen teams. We do our food service companies, because I guess it's the same in the rest of the European countries, most of the European countries. Like we have the food service companies that actually provide the menu and the food to these public canteens, and we do the training for them as well. We have sessions for guardians. It's very important because our culture is very linked to meat consumption. And so sometimes it's important to rest the parents and say, no, it's perfectly healthy. And it's very important for the environment that at least one meal per week or one meal periodically to be plant-based. We don't need to eat meat in every meal. So and children like it, and it's going to be fine and healthy. So it's important to have these sessions. And we do a ton of workshops. We have the certification for the public canteens that join the program. We do the carbon footprint calculation. So we have a calculator that, let's say, upon 6 months on 1 year, we do the calculation of the carbon emissions that were saved due to the program. And we have more than 100 plant-based meals recipes developed by nutritionists. So we know what are the quantities that should be provided to a child of a certain age and or like a teenager of another age. So we have this all separated. And we do the shopping list. So for instance, we say that, well, you should buy this type of tofu. And we do that. We do everything for the public canteen, for the school. Or we're now working with hospitals, so public canteen can be in a hospital as well. So the program states that for in the specific school or hospital or wherever we are working with, should offer the plant-based meal as a default option for all the students or for all users, weekly or bi-weekly. We actually said monthly previously, because now we're introducing this option, so we can make an agreement where the plant-based meal as default option is implemented on a monthly basis. So we are confident that this will reduce the environmental footprint, and we actually evaluate the impact by proving how it reduces the carbon footprint. And of course, we're promoting a more balanced diet, because here in Portugal, and it's the same in the rest of the Europe, we're actually consuming more meat than we should as the dietary recommendations. So let's look into the schools, what we are doing, and now everything is going in schools. So we already set an agreement with 8 municipalities, and this means, and you can see the municipalities, I thought that some of the participants are from Portugal, I guess, so they will probably recognize these cities, but I'll show the map in the next slide. So this means we are offering, we're increasing the plant-based meals per week in schools, and this is about more around 4,000 plant-based meals per week that are being offered thanks to this program. It is more than 250 schools. And here's the map. So basically, we are all over the place, from north to south. I'm very happy to say that. And we continue to make agreements with schools and municipalities. And it's very, I'm very happy to say that we are now in the situation that the municipality is the one to search for us. So this is already recognized as something that is needed. And so it's very, very good. And of course, you can see again here the different, the carbon footprint that is saved just because a plant-based meal is chosen against a plant-based meal. And we're talking about a huge difference with a single meal, less than 84%. This is the average. So let's look into a practical case. So I decided to bring a specific case in a city, and in particular, the Council of Stareja. So that's an example, because it's kind of the same in most of the cities we work with. So the Council of Stareja joined the program in October last year, and they decided to implement the plant-based meal as a default option once per week, which is the top level of our program. And we actually saw that there were no significant differences regarding food waste in the the day, like we think that specific day where we call the sustainable meal was offered, like the fully plant-based meal. So we see it here that they have kind of the same average waste per capita. So it's kind of the same. So this puts it positive. We thought that, well, because even if the plant-based meal is tasty, this difference children can, especially teenagers more than small children can feel like this is different for the meal they used to consume, but it's not the case. So we actually, like I said, we calculate the carbon footprint. So we do have a calculator, and we can say that just a swap of the plant-based meal, of the animal-based meal for plant-based meal once per week did a lot of difference. So after 6 months, we calculated what was the impact in Stareja, and we estimated that about around 132 tons of dioxide carbon equivalent were saved. And this is equivalent to more than 200 round-trip plane trips to Lisbon-Munich, which is incredible. And here you can see some examples of this is actually a real photo of a plate that was served. And you can see here that this single meal has a 40% less carbon footprint than the version with fish. And then another plate, this red beans, corn, and soy chili with rice. This is real photos. And this one has a carbon footprint that is 14 times smaller than the carbon footprint of similar chili with beef. And so now we're expanding to hospitals and other units, but especially hospitals. So we just made an agreement with one of the largest food catering companies in the country. And we start working with Hospital Santa Maria and Garcia Horta, and people here watching from Portugal will probably know where how huge these hospitals are. And we just not putting for these hospitals, this is the first time we're working with hospitals. The agreement is not about putting the plant-based meal as a default option. They still have the meat option, but once per week, there's only one meat option and 2 plant-based meal options. You know what I mean? Like we're twisting this up. There's usually you see that's a lot of meat options and one single plant-based meal option. Now okay, let's keep the meat option, but there's 2 plant-based meal option with fewer ecological footprint. So it is very good. So yeah, and this is the one photo of the cooking training with the cooks from one of the hospitals. So yeah, and we do the cooking training like all the time. I'm actually speaking right now, and I have the team doing a cooking training in Leiria, that's the city of Portugal, right now at this moment. And so we actually set an agreement for the first time also with a higher education institution. It's called the Piaget Institute. It's Lisbon, and this agreement states that 120 meal swaps will get 120 meal swaps from animal-based to plant-based, which means we're improving and increasing the plant-based options. So yeah, thank you. That's it. Thank you. Have any questions? Let me know.
Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, there is a first question in the chat. How do you count carbon footprint?
So let me just see if I can. Here you go. So basically, we have into consideration the PRU-NAMCHEC. You probably know this big important study. It's the most complete study of PRU-NAMCHEC from 2018. We have the calculator that we basically have the recipe and with all the ingredients that are needed for that specific recipe, and the lookalike recipe with the meat. So we do calculate the carbon footprint for each of the recipe, basically taking account the quantities and put in the calculator the carbon emissions for each ingredient. And the emissions we take into consideration the emissions that were set in the ProNM check study. That's a very wide study, and this is the one we take into consideration. To be honest with you, we want to improve this to get data from Portugal in specific. But right now we have this global data. It's very hard to find data from Portugal in particular. So we have this global data, and this is the one, the most, the meta-analysis. This is the huge study, and this is the one we are considering.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. And we have another question. Are your services for schools free?
Oh, that's a very silly ask that as well. They are completely free. That's why we signed the agreement with 8 municipalities and not 100. Because we have, of course, this is a granted project, so we are a non-profit organization. So we have donations, and that's how we work. We wanted to make completely free program. We don't want to select municipalities by a certain understand how can we don't want something could interfere with our decision. Like we want to make it like a very straightforward free service. So it's free.
Okay, thank you. And another question about carbon footprint. So do you count transport from the farm in the carbon footprint?
Yes, the ProNM check just considers all the. But it's important to say, even if we consider that because of the ProNM check study, the transport is the contribution to the carbon emissions from transportation is very small. It's not very substantial, as you probably know.
5%.
Exactly. So as you probably know, we need to, of course, it's important. It's always better to consume local. It's important to say that, especially for the economy and for food security. But it's important to say that if we want to be, if we want our food consumption to be environmentally friendly, we should look closer to two things: quantities, waste, and the type of product. So always choose, even if you look to most of the dietary communications, you'll see that if you look at we have a food wheel here in Portugal, like a wheel, a kind of plate. Some countries have a pyramid. And if you look to the food, the plate, like the dietary recommendations, you see that most of all of the recommendations are plant-based food. So we just not it's important to choose plant-based even if you're not making like a fully plant-based diet, we need to choose plant-based most of the time, if you know what I mean. So it's not only about environmental aspect, but also about following the dietary recommendations.
Okay, there are several questions in the chat. So one is about how do you define local, and because in the title is local plant-based. So how do you define local, and how do you work to make it local? And the second one is probably what are the meat substitutes that you promote? Is there a focus on locally produced whole foods?
Very good question, but well, my presentation is for 15 minutes. I could talk a lot about this, but yeah, regarding the title saying local, I was not referring to the local products. I was referring to the local action. So because we actually working with local schools and local community, in terms of Portugal speaking, like not working with outside Portugal, but we do promote local, like the buying of local products. And every time we work with the municipality, because we want the perfection with that place tied to buy local, and we try to guide municipality towards that. But it's up to them. It's not part of the agreement. It's up to the municipality to choose where they buy their goods. And like I said in the presentation, we have this tool, Eco 360 in Portugal, and we advise municipality to follow that tool because it's not well known. So it's a way of us to disseminate that strategy as well. And the second question, so regarding the meat substitutes, it is a great question. Yes, there is a focus on locally produced old foods, but we actually, more than that, what we basically almost all recipes that we give to the municipalities to implement during the plant-based day, that the plant-based meal, the fall day, like I'll say like 90% of the recipes, like 80% of the recipes, they are that the protein sources, the main protein source is legumes. So we value legumes a lot, and we do not work with ultra processed plant-based products. We do not work with them. It's not because we have something against that. It's just because if we're looking for the perfection and for ideal situation, we work with all foods and we try to promote locally, but it's not always possible because especially legumes here in Portugal, we import a lot of legumes. So if we want to increase the consumption of legumes, probably they won't be totally local, but if that's possible, we promote that, of course. But so the meat substitutes, the main meat substitutes you work with, it's legumes, but also tofu, which is a healthy legume derived from soy, and it's a healthy product, and sometimes seitan, which is not very well known in the rest of the European countries, but it's kind of known here in Portugal more than the rest of European countries. But the thing about, for instance, tofu is very healthy, but it's not. But we prefer legumes just for one reason, like pulses. I'm saying legumes, pulses, just because like chickpea, peas, beans, just for one reason. Because children, some young, especially children, they are not familiar with tofu, and they prefer like the legumes. So just basically because of that, it's more familiar to them. So and it's more, we can like make recipes that are more versatile, like with the legumes. So we have like this table of punctuation of the meals, the dishes, and the legumes meals have a higher punctuation, and we follow that. So we have this very planned. It's not like we're let's give this recipe. No, we know exactly how this recipe will be received in school. So we have this all set up.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a comment and a question. So while a plant-based diet is undoubtedly a step forward for health and the environment, most of these products currently come from industrial agricultural system. So how can we transition towards a local agroecological food system that aligns better with sustainability and supports local producers?
I don't know where this Roxana is based, but I wouldn't say that, definitely I wouldn't say that most of the products are from industrial agriculture systems. I wouldn't say that doesn't need to be the case. I'll talk a little bit about Portugal's situation because it's the reality. If we want, we can get local food from a sustainable agriculture system. And we talk about farmers market here in the previous presentation, and it's a very a good solution for us to look for plant-based meals, ingredients or plant-based food that is not from industrial agriculture systems. So we just have to look a little bit more. And it's important to say that even plant-based food that was produced that came from industrial agriculture systems, in general, they are, generally speaking, they still more sustainable than meat that comes from industrial agriculture systems, because we do have the industrial animal farming, and is one of the main causes of the carbon emissions from the food system. So it's always better to choose plant-based food, even if we're talking about within the industrial agricultural systems, but yet it's always better to look for farmers markets, look for local farmers, and it's not always the case that it's more expensive. If we look for legumes, rice, potatoes, greens, we probably will be saving money, even if we do that like some days a week. We're probably saving money because animal products are naturally more expensive because of the natural resources they need to be produced. So it's also important to say that a plant-based diet, it's okay to have, but doesn't need to have like this plant-based burgers or plant-based sauces. It's okay to consume it once in a while, like everything in life, but it's not. But a healthy plant-based diet, it has simply legumes, like I said, greens, potatoes, rice, tofu with a cheap, healthy plant-based protein source. So if we're talking about plant-based burgers, plant-based sauces, that's not like, it shouldn't be like the rule in your diet. And even if we talk about plant-based or animal-based, so plant-based is simply the whole foods. They are cheap. They are generally cheaper.
Okay, thank you, Joanna. We'll take another question. Do you have some seasonal fruit and vegetable calendar for Portugal?
We do have, we made that a while ago, and we shared with the municipalities just for them to have some guidance regarding. It's a very good question as well regarding what the fruits and vegetables they should buy. We do have, and we share with the councils and municipalities. Yes.
Okay, and then I think we can close with a comment from from Amanda. Amanda, please share. You can share directly the comment you wrote in the chat if you want.
I just there was a note about farmers market prices. There's been a lot of different studies in different places about that, but I was on a webinar yesterday with the World Farmers Market Association Coalition, and someone mentioned a study, I think in Canada from last year, that showed that farmers prices at farmers markets didn't increase at nearly the same rate as grocery store supermarket prices increased during time of inflation. So there's, I think, a lot to be said about these local supply chains in terms of their resilience to economic shocks, among others. Is that the comment you meant, Rafael?
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if you want to comment or there are other comments. Okay, no more question in the chat. Anyway, the material, both presentation will be available on the Urban Agenda website, the recording, and we will share the material with our partners. So if there are more questions, we will share with you this question. And so the presentation were very interesting, and so thank you both for your time and availability. Yeah. So I think we can, I don't know, Alessandra, if you want to comment or...
No, I just wanted to thank you. I also find it interesting and very relevant for the partnership, and I'm happy that there was even beyond the partnership participation of other people. So thanks also for sharing the material. For sure, we will cherish and make good use. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think we can close the webinar here. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you.